I've always been surprised, really surprised, like where my career goes and where life goes. I kind of just work hard and it goes in interesting directions. And NJI is one of those. So when we were selling our company, there was a company that I wanted to buy called Jarrell. It was a liver cell culture company. I wanted to integrate it into Visicol. And our acquirer said, like, hey, just wait. Once we buy you guys, we'll give you the money to go buy them, and then you can do the integration. So we closed the transaction, and our acquirer was against their word. They said, here's the money, go buy this other company. So it just so happens the company that I wanted to buy, they were in the incubator that NJI runs. So I show up and we bring a moving truck, we'll pick up all their stuff after we buy them. And when I'm there, I learned a little bit about NJI and I was like, oh, this is a cool place. It'd be cool to maybe work here, work with these guys one day. And that was like the first time I was introduced to them. So when we sold the company, and you sell a company, you're in this like honeymoon period for like 6 months where everything's like cool and copacetic. And then eventually you realize it's very different running a company you own versus running a company you used to own. And there's like, like the management team doesn't like you because like you think you're the boss and they're actually the boss. And like, it's a weird dynamic.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Going Beyond the Deal podcast. Today we have Dr. Michael Johnson, president of the New Jersey Innovation Institute on the show today. We're going to talk about Michael's journey from college to entrepreneurship and selling a company, the first company that he started in the life science space, to his journey in taking the helm as the president of the New Jersey Innovation Institute. We're also going to talk about Michael's new book that's coming out, The 1% Dad, to talk about how health and fitness has really influenced his life and his career. You're not going to want to miss this episode. Do you want me to call you Dr. Johnson or just Michael? What would you prefer?
Michael's fine. I spent a lot of time in college, but Michael's fine.
All right, let's do Michael. I just wanted to make sure you had that I addressed you properly from the beginning.
Absolutely. No, that works for me.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. So just to give a little bit of background, the one thing that I kind of pride myself in personally is I love cheering on people from the sidelines, even if they don't realize that I'm doing it. Michael's one of these guys that I had been following on LinkedIn. We have a lot of mutual friends, but he started putting some of the fitness stuff out there into the professional community. And I go, that's a guy that I want to talk to because, we're essentially cut from the same cloth. I'm just not as, smart as he is. And I can't put a doctor in front of my name, unfortunately. But I think at first, when I first reached out to you, you were like, what the hell is this guy bothering me for? And then it just turns out I'm just a big fan and I wanted to get on here and talk to you.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad you reached out. But eventually, if you spend enough time in college, they give you a doctorate. So yeah, okay. You get one eventually.
Yeah, I'm hoping maybe I can get like an honorary degree someday, from like,
there you go.
Fairleigh Dickinson. They're like, who are you again? We'll see what happens.
You donate enough money, it'll happen. I guarantee you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll have to make some big donations then. So Michael, tell me a little bit about you. Listen, really impressive. You're still a relatively young man, but you've had a lot of exciting things happen to you throughout your life. And then now at the helm of a, really important organization here in New Jersey. Can you before we get into the New Jersey Innovation Institute, let's talk about you and kind of where things got started and everything. We've already had this conversation before, but I'd love for the audience to hear this from you.
Absolutely. So, I won't go all the way back to kindergarten here, but for me as a kid, I've always been a huge fan of science. My dad was an 8th grade science teacher, always loved science, blowing stuff up, building rockets, always a big fan of that. And for me, that transitioned into my undergraduate studies. I majored in biology at Muhlenberg College, but I was always a big athlete. So I played college football at Muhlenberg. I played college hockey there. So it was balancing the science with the athletics. And coming out of my my undergrad, I had this decision of like, what do I want to do with my life? And like a lot of young folks, I had absolutely no idea. My father was a teacher. That was all I had seen kind of growing up. So I was like, I'll be a teacher too. I did secondary education. So thought about being a teacher and realized I had no interest in actually being a teacher.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate enough to get this opportunity to intern with NASA. So National Space Association Administration. And I worked there and I realized that, holy crap, science is a career. And like, there are people who are scientists, there are people who spend their whole lives doing science. And I said, that's what I want to do. So
you spent time in Florida then?
No, I was actually out in California. So I was at the Edwards Air Force Base at the desert. I was working at UC Irvine, Dryden Flight Research Center out there, and I got lucky. It was a program that was super prestigious. This was 2011. So I had applied for like 120 jobs right in the middle of the financial crisis. No one was hiring, and the only job I got was the best job out there, which was NASA. So it was like it was awesome. It worked out really well. I actually got a call one day from them out of the blue telling me I was rejected from the program, and then another I was rejected from the waiting list. And somebody like dropped out a week before it was starting. And I just said, yeah, I'll come out to San Diego and live out there for a summer. It worked out. It definitely changed the course of my life, picking up the phone and working there. But from there, I did a PhD at Rutgers. And my PhD was in environmental sciences. I was doing work on biofuels. This is when gas prices were like $4 a gallon. So I was doing a ton of work trying to create biodiesel from algae, like the pond scum you see in ponds. And while I was there, there was another PhD student working on a similar biofuels project who invented this cool technology for imaging tissues. And it kind of blew my mind. It was a way to look at like biopsies and mouse brains without putting them on glass microscope slides. And I met him. We became like instant friends and business partners, and we created a company around this technology that we built from just the two of us in a little tiny lab at Rutgers to about a 50-person company that was doing drug discovery research for pharma companies who were helping pharma companies understand if their drugs were safe, where they went, what they did, based upon this technology we invented during our PhD work. And we went through that whole process of raising money, building a company, eventually sold the company back in 2021 to a publicly traded Swedish company. And from there, I stayed on for a little while. But as you mentioned in the intro, most recently took the role as president of the New Jersey Innovation Institute. But for me, I mean, I've always been just super passionate about science and really passionate about working out and working hard and everything that I do, and marrying those throughout my career. So I'm glad you noticed my post here.
Yeah, no, man, it's awesome stuff. I just to get back into the tissue imaging, like that is super interesting. I mean, so you guys kind of started it, bootstrapped it yourselves, and then you did end up taking on investors. I mean, can you get into a little bit about like that and that process? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I think really people want to hear about for sure.
Yeah, unlike the tech space, like in the tech space, if you're 25 years old, you're like old. But in the biotech space, nobody starts a company unless they're like 60 years old and had 1,000 publications, and nobody will give you money in that case. So we're in this life science space. We're trying to raise a bunch of money to go out and build this company. And we're like 25, and we're saying, hey, we have like no publications, no track record, but give us a lot of money to start a life science business, which is crazy. So we pitched to like dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of different folks about trying to get money to start the company. And at the time, we didn't have like two nickels to rub together. So we were grad students making like $25,000 a year. We were going out trying to raise $500,000 to launch our company out of Rutgers University, where we were doing our PhD. And we were fortunate to get some offers of money from Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania, to move out to PA. And at the time, I was like so frustrated that I couldn't find money. I emailed the president of Rutgers, and it was Barchi at the time. I said, President Barchi, we're going to leave the state of New Jersey and go to Pennsylvania and take your intellectual property with us. Like, please help us. And within like 5 minutes, he had emailed and called like a dozen people. And like, there's people whose whole job it is, now I know this, to not make that happen. So like, I got calls from economic development and all these different organizations. And eventually we, like the next day, were able to get a pitch with a group called the Foundation Venture Capital Group in New Brunswick that wrote us our first check for $500,000. So they put the first money into the company. That allowed us to quit our part-time jobs we were doing in addition to our PhDs, jump into the thing full-time, and start running. And then from there, we raised another $800,000 in angel investment funding and about $4 million in funding from the NSF and NIH, so grant dollars. In total, like $5-6 million in funding, but super difficult, terrible process of raising money. It is very
Yeah.
hard to do.
Yeah. So from starting the company to your eventual exit, I mean, how long were you involved with that whole process?
I officially started working on the technology in 2014. We officially launched in February of 2016, and then we sold in May of 21. So just about 5 years it took us to launch and sell the company, which is a quick period of time for a life science company to go from zero to we sold for about $20 million. That's a good question. When I first got into this, I thought people were crazy that sold companies because Like you have an asset that's growing 20% a year. Why the hell would you sell the thing if you're in control? And naively, of course, that was what I thought, but you're never actually in control. There's macro factors, there's your board, and there's a golden rule. It's like the person with the gold makes the rules, and you as a founder don't have the gold. It's the board, it's whoever your investors are. We had a lot of autonomy though. We had really good investors that trusted us. We had really good relationships with our investors. But we got to COVID, and COVID was terrible. March of 2020, pretty much every single one of our customers called us up the same day and said, "Hey, we're canceling everything." And this is after like having maybe like $1.5 million in purchase orders the first 2 months of the year. We were like off the races, and then the world stopped. And I went to our team and I said, we got 6 months of cash left. We're going to double down on research and development while we have no projects and see what happens. And 3 months later, it seems like every consultant told pharma companies the same thing, which is like, well, your employees can't come back to work, but contract research organizations can still work. So on that same day, like every company came back in June and said, we need you guys to do all of our work now. And the business just boomed. And from there, one day I went to my co-founder and I said, hey man, like our valuation is contingent upon our rate of growth. We're not going to grow like this forever. Like we're smart, but the reason we're booming isn't because of us. It's because we're in a bubble. And eventually the music's going to stop. People are going to go back to work. The VC and the PE funding going into biotech is going to slow down. Our rate of growth is going to go down. Our valuation is going to precipitously slide. And I had like this deep fear that we were going to like double our revenue, but our valuation was actually to go down because our rate of growth is going down. And so I kind of lobbied hard. Our board was not for the idea of selling the company. They thought the COVID bubble was going to keep going and going, and we should just hang on and make as much money as possible. But I was adamant that like this is going to stop. The music's going to stop, and we have to get off before it does. And so I took the business out to a number of folks for sale. I got a bunch of bids that were out there, and we got a deal that I felt was incredibly fair. I mean, more than fair for where we were at. And it was a lot of work making the board and all of our investors go along with it. But in retrospect, what I was afraid of would happen actually did happen to all of our peers. So a lot of our peers didn't sell, and they're in a position now where they're twice as big, worth half as much because we were in a bubble. And it's tough to spot a bubble when you're in it, but like all the factors pointed towards that. And on top of that, like going through COVID was terrible. Like the governor of New Jersey was the time confiscating gloves, pipette tips, and all the things crucial for our business. There was a point we were actually hiding lab supplies in our ceiling because we didn't want the state troopers to come by and confiscate stuff, which they were able to do. Like we forget, but like they repealed illegal search and seizure for like 3 months in New Jersey. So that was a problem. We had the Great Resignation to go through. Like there were all these problems, and eventually I was like, "We're in a bubble. I am done with this. Let's take some chips off the table." And there's like the personal decision of like, does putting, like $3 million or $5 million in your pocket make much of a difference? So like, it's the two in the hand versus one, or one in the hand versus two in the bush argument of like, hey, it doesn't make more sense to take on this extra risk. So for like those personal reasons, for those macro reasons, we decided to sell it. And in retrospect, it was, the right decision, but at the time it was a tough one.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, was like, in hindsight, well, like you'd made the right decision. So like, going back to it now, do you still talk to the board members and everything and said, damn it, Michael, you were right? Or did you get to do an I told you so? Just kidding. I don't know.
No, it's a good question. So like half our board was of the opinion that we trust you guys as an management team. If you think this is the right decision,
That's awesome.
You got plenty of skin in the game. Like we're totally behind you. And that was the early investors, right? So the people who put money early in, they don't care that much because like they're going to get 10x no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Because they were so early and they took the big gamble. It's the later folks where like if you raise money a year before you're going to sell, they're like, hey, we're getting 30% more money. This is not what we signed up for. We wanted to get 3x or 5x.
Yeah.
So those folks are the ones that, nothing against them, but they're going to fight that more. And, I think some of those folks we don't talk to as much anymore because it definitely soured the relationship. Like they're pissed. And, I get that. And I think for those folks, like they signed up for something that they didn't quite get. They still got a good return on investment, but it's not what they signed up for. So there are still hard feelings, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah. So now let's talk about, from there, you stayed on for a little while with the you said Swiss company, I believe.
Swedish, yeah.
Swedish company. And then, what was the next couple of years like, going up to, NJ, I want to keep saying NJII. I don't know what the best way
No,
to
NJI, there it is. Yeah,
okay, NJII. What's, what, like, how did that occur?
I've always been surprised, really surprised, like where my career goes and where life goes. I kind of just work hard and it goes in interesting directions. And NJI is one of those. So when we were selling our company, there was a company that I wanted to buy called Jarrell. It was a liver cell culture company. I wanted to integrate it into Visicol. And our acquirer said, like, hey, just wait. Once we buy you guys, we'll give you the money to go buy them, and then you can do the integration. So we closed the transaction, and our acquirer was against their word. They said, here's the money, go buy this other company. So it just so happens the company that I wanted to buy, they were in the incubator that NJI runs. So I show up and we like, bring a moving truck, we'll pick up all their stuff after we buy them. And when I'm there, I learned a little bit about NJI and I was like, oh, this is a cool place. It'd be cool to maybe work here, work with these guys one day. And that was like the first time I was introduced to them. So when we sold the company, and you sell a company, you're in this like honeymoon period for like 6 months where everything's like cool and copacetic. And then eventually you realize it's very different running a company you own versus running a company you used to own. And there's like, like the management team doesn't like you because like you think you're the boss and they're actually the boss. And like, it's a weird dynamic. And eventually you realize, everyone realized this, hey, I need to go. This is not for me anymore. I transitioned it. And it took me probably longer than it should have to make that realization. But I left after about 2.5 years. And I left to go to NJI because they had posted a role as a new president of the organization. They're looking for someone who'd commercialize IP from academia, which I did. They're looking for somebody who could come in and run a lot of programs, but also be a bridge between academia and the outside world. Very few people have a PhD and also commercialize technologies. So it was like the perfect role at the perfect time. I also wanted to get out of my non-compete, which I was in, and it like all worked out perfectly, but not something I'd ever kind of put my mind on, like, hey, I'm going to go run a think tank and a research institute. But right place, right time, and it's a great place to run and lead.
So now, can you kind of just talk about NJII? Like, just talk about like what it is, who it serves, and how can it serve maybe some of the listeners that are here today?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So it's important to understand what it does, right? So like higher ed is this beast in the US. It's where all of our basic research happens. Over the last 50 years, companies stopped doing most of the basic research. Used to have Nokia Bell Labs, RCA, these companies that invested huge amounts of money in basic research. That's kind of gone away. You have like incremental research. Like I have my iPhone 16 from my iPhone 15. They're the same darn thing. And it's very
Yeah.
incremental in nature, where like your really transformative research is in higher ed. But higher ed, it's tough to work with. So for organizations that want to talk to faculty, they want to leverage cutting edge research, it's tough to do that. And so about 10 years ago, NJIT, the state's polytechnic university in New Jersey, said, why don't we create an organization that can move at the speed of business, but is not beholden to the bureaucracy of higher ed, but can yet leverage all those resources.
Mm-hmm.
And NJI was born because of that. So it's a separate 501c3 from NJIT. It's able to leverage all the resources of the university, but move at the speed of business. So for example, we run an accelerator program for Merck. So Merck came to us and said, hey, we're great at therapeutics. We want to look at digital technologies that we're not really looking at today. We want to make investments in those. We want to train those folks. And for us as an organization, we can quickly lease a space where we house those companies. We can deploy investments into them. We can build training and programs for those folks. So we work with a lot of companies, a lot of organizations that want to leverage resources from a higher institution and do things that are rather atypical. We run a manufacturing facility for the Department of Defense, looking at advanced manufacturing. It's a physical 20,000 square foot 3D printing facility for looking at like metal 3D printing and advanced fabrication. Again, something that higher ed can do, but it's very tough for them to like sign a lease and build a building, where we're able to fill in the gap. We, by the numbers, have about 100 people that work on projects across defense, artificial intelligence, healthcare, entrepreneurship, and also professional and corporate education. So do a lot of different things, but where most companies and people interact with us is in artificial intelligence. We do consulting projects for small and mid-sized companies, and then also in learning and development, so helping people upskill. Every single week, we have people reaching out saying like, hey, our people don't know how to use AI. Can you come teach them how to do prompting? Can you teach my super smart scientist or engineer how to manage people? So like first time technical manager training. So we're trying to fill in those educational, those research gaps where companies have. And in the AI space, I mean, every company out there has problems that they want to solve. They know AI can solve them. They don't know where to get started, and they don't want to pay for a Deloitte or Accenture to do it. That's super expensive. So we fill in the gap. So we're a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I would say AI and training, where we engage with most of the companies and leaders that are out there.
And then how does it work from just like a payment standpoint? I mean, is it something that, it's just a lesser cost than a Deloitte or something, or like how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, frank, like our costs for something like AI are half or a third the price of the big folks that are out there, but the quality isn't the same, right? So we're leveraging academic talent, we're leveraging graduate student talent, some of our own FTEs. It's going to be slower. The quality of work is going to be a bit lower than those folks. But if you want to get a project off the ground quickly, something that's relatively innovative, or something that's pretty research based, so even big companies that are Fortune 500 companies, they might have 1,000 people in their IT team, they might have two computer scientists at the whole company. Well, we have hundreds of computer scientists within higher ed. So we're able to provide some things you couldn't get in a traditional setting, but definitely at a much lower cost than you get from a major consultant type company.
Could you be a helpful resource to someone like to Michael Johnson, years back? Would you guys have been the place to be able to help kind of take your company to the next level, right? If somebody has a great idea, they don't know where to start. I mean, are you working with NJIT students that might have a great idea for technology and kind of help them get through the process without some of the landmines and stuff that you might have stepped on when you were trying to do it yourself?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we have an entrepreneurship division within NJI, and that's the core focus is trying to translate technologies into the marketplace, the products and services that people can actually use. So we have a number of different funded programs for folks, whether it's training or mentorship or events, because part of innovation ecosystem is just meeting other people. It's very
Yeah.
tough to meet entrepreneurs. Like even for myself, I didn't even know entrepreneurship was an option because I've never met someone who started a company.
Yeah.
Every time I talk entrepreneurship, the question I always ask is who knows somebody here that sold the company for seven figures? No one raises their hand. And like, how could you
Yeah.
possibly answer questions about that if you've never met someone who's done it? So we have a lot of networking programs. We have great entrepreneurs we bring to the table for different events that people can just talk to and interact and build their network. We've recently launched a venture studio with the Economic Development Authority in New Jersey, and that's a $12 million effort. We're trying to build 10 companies over the next 4 or 5 years, leveraging innovative technologies from students, from faculty, from other folks and partners across the state. And that's been a big success for us, even just early. It's been a few weeks, tons of folks reaching out about that program. And we can make connections to all of our different partners if it's not a good fit for us. And then on the NJIT side of the house, we do have a Center for Translational Research that helps people get early stage ideas of things that are a little more commercially ready.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. Before we go, we definitely want to make sure that we have a good way to get in contact with you for any of these type of companies and stuff. Because I mean, that's the real, premise of the whole podcast here is to be a way to spotlight you and the excellent work that you guys are doing. Outside of the key initiatives that you kind of went through, is there any, what are the kind of the visions and future goals for NJI? I mean, is your role as president, is there any end date to that, or is it just like is it something that you're voted into, or this is something that you're hoping to take the helm on for the next 20, 30 years?
Well, fortunately, it's not a political appointment, right? So there's no end date on it. And I work with it as long as possible. And our goals, we set out to 2030. And for that aligns with the university. It aligns, it's a nice date to plan for. But roughly, we want to double the size of the organization, double the impact of the organization, and position it as the key opinion leader on the state on innovation. We have a bunch of things going on in the states. We have, of course, your energy prices have gone up 20%. We have all these different initiatives around how do we spur innovation, whether it's AI and data centers, whether it's how to foster technology translation. And for all these conversations, we want to position ourselves to be the leader in all those conversations, to affect policy changes that are made, to affect decisions and funding that's made in the state. Because for us to be a place that people actually want to live and work, we have to have jobs that people want. And a big piece of that is making sure companies come here, startups come here, founders come here. So we're trying to lead that conversation. But by the numbers, we're trying to double our revenue, double our employees roughly over the next 5 years that work for NJI. And along the way, help as many founders as possible, as many entrepreneurs as possible, and also corporations. We find that we interact with companies. There are so many touch points. We come in and maybe help with AI that turns into a sponsored research project for faculty. It turns into them hiring our students. So yeah, we're trying to make those connections as much as we possibly can.
Yeah. I feel like New Jersey has become a real hub for a lot of different things now, with technology, et cetera. I mean, like they're saying, Newark is now becoming like, could become the new, Silicon Valley, et cetera. I mean, right here in Monmouth County, we have, Netflix coming into town. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of really exciting things, going on in New Jersey. And I know you can appreciate this. It's funny whenever I travel and somebody goes, "Oh, you're from Jersey," and they only think of you from the television show, and all those guys are
Or Staten Island.
yeah, Staten Island that have come here. But the funny thing is, like I always say, like this is the greatest place in the world to grow up. I'm equidistant to New York City, to Philadelphia. I could be in DC within a couple hours. I could be at the beach. I could be all over there's everything here in this state, and there's a lot of opportunity here. And it's great that NJII is doing all those different things. Let's kind of jump to some of the other stuff. The 1% Dad. New books coming out. I'm writing a book myself right now, so we've been kind of going back and forth on this a little bit. Let's talk about the 1% Dad, because I really think it's going to speak to some of the things that you're doing on a daily basis to make yourself as successful as you have been. Can you talk a little bit about your health and fitness journey and kind of what how did this come about and everything?
Yeah. So my journey to health and fitness is that back in middle school, I was a bit of a nerd. So I was like captain of the robotics team. I was a nerd, and I wanted to be cool going into high school and college and the rest of my life. And I was thinking through like, well, how do you do that? And I was looking at all the people around me, and you're the guy who's like great at playing music. I'm like, well, that's definitely not going to be me. You're the guy who's like good looking. I'm like, well, you can't change how you look. So I was thinking like, how do you become cool, and like, what can you do? And I realized that a lot of the folks that were cool in high school played football. And I was like, well, I don't play football. I can't possibly do that. I was talking to my brother one day. I was asking him about one of his friends, and he's like, oh, yeah, Eric just works really hard. And I was like, you can just work really hard and get good at football? Like, I could do that. Like, it's just top effort. So, like, I just put time and effort in. I could play football. So I set this goal when I was like in eighth grade. I'm like, I'm going to go play football. Never played football before. Like, I played hockey growing up, but like, wasn't a football player by any stretch. Couldn't catch a football to save my life. And so I was like, I'm just going to work super hard. And I started doing that and it started paying dividends. I started playing my freshman year of high school, my sophomore year, my junior year. I got better and better and better, just continually crushed the gym, like never missing a day of working out. And then when it came my senior year of high school, my head coach, who I respected greatly, he's a great guy, I still talk to him. He came up to me, he was like, hey, I want to make you captain for your senior year. And I was like, here's this guy I like never played before. And like on my senior team, we had two guys who played in the NFL. So like it like blew me away. Like, oh my God, if I do just work hard, like great things can happen. And that got so ingrained in me that since I was 14 and like starting this journey, I have never missed a day of working out. So like 6 days a week, ever since then, it's so key for my success. Like it makes me better at every other dimension of my life that I've been just so committed to it. And now that I'm older, I have kids, I've still kept on this working out. It's always been so key to who I am. And the impetus for writing the 1% Dad book is like that question that you're always asking yourself of, am I doing a good job? Right. So like you got your career, you got your relationship with your spouse, relationship with your kids, relationship with yourself. You're making time for yourself to, keep sanity. And then the dimension like most dads forget about is fitness. And like it's about you is kind of selfish, but kind of not. So I wrote this book, 1% Dad, to help fathers excel in all those different dimensions with a focus on fitness, where most dads are definitely lacking, and balancing all those different priorities. And so far, I plan to launch it in July, so July 24th. I sent it out to probably 400 different fathers at this point for feedback, for advice, to see what they think. And the feedback has blown me away, like what people think, and just going through my personal journey and talking about things like how mental health plays it, how diet plays it, like how do you eat healthy when you go to conferences and everything's crap that's put in front of you. So I've been blown away by the support I've gotten. I'm excited for the launch, and looking forward to it. I dive into like the whole journey of how I went through that process in the book and how I've stayed with it all these years.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's crazy though, right? I mean, like I've talked to other people. For me, fitness has always been more of a mental thing for me. And then the physique always is like the secondary, part of it. That's really cool. But the one thing that I've noticed as I've become more successful and as I've been out there more, people judge you by the way that you look, whether you like it or not. And when someone sees, when I see you and I see that you're fit, I see that you're disciplined, and I start to make a judgment about you based on your outside appearance, right? Which I think that a lot of people don't realize that. And in the business world, it's like, okay, well, if this guy is so disciplined about what he's doing, then he's going to be disciplined about the way that he serves me, right? And that's definitely a huge part of it. So, I mean, what are some like actionable tips that you could give to somebody? I mean, obviously, go pick up the book on Amazon. I know we're self-publishing it. Pick up the book in July, for sure. I've already started reading it myself. Excellent, excellent stuff here. But what are some actionable tips that you would give to the listeners here?
Yeah, there's a couple in the book, and I preface the book with that I'm not an influencer, right? Like I don't spend 5 hours a day doing a cold plunge in a sauna. Like, you don't have time to do that. So the book is all focused around here's a workout program that works for dads. Now it's not probably the most fun workout program. You're not going to have social interaction with other people. There's a bunch of things that you're not going to have, but it's a very utilitarian way of looking at working out from a father's perspective of making time to eat, making time to stay healthy and hit the gym and look good. Because you mentioned it's not just about working out for the sake of working out. You also want to look good. And the book focuses on that a lot. And it's not just the fitness, it is aesthetics as well. You want to look like you work out to other folks around you because it shows discipline, it shows commitment and all those things, especially in a business setting where you are being judged by how you look. But one of the things I go into in the book is just your weight. One of the things I tell everyone is people talk about like, well, my weight, I want to be here, I'm here. And the best trick for this is weighing yourself each and every day. Every morning I get up, I go down the stairs, I step on the scale, I look at my weight. And the reason people don't like doing this is your weight is objective reality. It's what you ate, it's how much activity you have. And for anyone who has a goal, let's say it's losing 20 pounds, 30 pounds, whatever it is, the first thing is just measuring the thing that matters, which is your weight. So for me, that's something I've done since I was 14 years old. And if I want to lose weight, I want to gain weight, I gotta look at it. I gotta look at, hey, I'm eating too much. I'm probably not doing enough. So I go into that in detail in my book. The other aspect is protein. So protein is the building block of muscle, as you know, but our diets in the Western world are terrible with this. Like most of the food that's presented to you, especially as a business executive, you travel, are processed carbohydrates and fats. So when I go for meetings or I'm traveling, I will pack things ahead of time. I will plan a ton of different restaurants where I know I can eat healthy. Because otherwise, you're going to go and just eat garbage the whole time. You go to a Coppo's, you get a sub. It's got like a millimeter of terribly processed meat on it, bag of chips, all this stuff that you don't want. So those are two big ones: the diet, and then focus on protein in all your meals. As far as working out, though, there's no rocket science here. I think one of the discouraging things is that it takes a long time to look the way that you want to look. It's continual effort. And the question I ask folks in the book is: you can work out 3 days, 4 days, 5, 6 days a week. It doesn't really matter that much. It'll change how you look and exactly how shredded you are or how much you bench press. But what's most important is how can you be consistent? What are the number of days that you can work out for the next 30 years? There's no program. It's not a 90-day like get shredded program. It's like, here's the thing, I'm setting you up from the time you're 25, the time you're 85, and this is something you're going to stick to. So picking that number and then working backwards from there is the workouts I lay out in the book. But those three things I think are critical: the diet, the weight for accountability, and just being consistent. People get off track and then you're out of whack forever.
Yeah, I think it's a problem. I mean, that most people have is they're not willing to be that consistent, and then they just start chasing the next shiny object, right? Whatever it be, keto, carnivore, now the sugar diet, all these different things, right? You can get to a point where you can start experimenting once you achieve the goal. But at the end of the day, I just, people say all the time, oh, well, it sounds way too complicated what you do to be in this type of shape. But I was like, it's not that complicated. You just have to find something that you can be consistent with. Because at the end of the day, all of these things work, but you never give it enough time and you don't track the details to be able to know what's moving the needle or not. I'll tell you, my motivation, and I'd love to hear your motivation. People often ask me, why do I put in so much energy and effort into my workouts? And it came down to my daughter, right? When she was around 3 years old, she pulled on my pants leg and she's like, Daddy, you going to work out today? And I said, yeah, of course I'm going to work out today. And she goes, what about tomorrow? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And she said, well, what about the next day? And I said, yes, Charlie, what are you getting at here? Like, of course, Daddy works out every day. She goes, you look like a superhero, and I don't want you to ever change the way that you look. And to me, like, how, like, that's my motivation for everything now. Like, I mean, my daughter recognizes that I'm doing this. I'm planting this habit. What was a thing, what is the motivation for you to this day? Does it still go back to your 14-year-old self that was like, I'm really into science and inventing and all this stuff, and I just want to have a way to fit in with the group, or has that evolved over time?
When I was in college, I tore my ACL my junior year, and it was like late in the year, so there's no way I was coming back for my senior year. I think my dad was more discouraged than I was. I like wasn't going to keep playing football my senior year, and he asked me one day. He's kind of like frustrated. He's like, Why are you still going to the gym if you're not playing football anymore?" And at the point, I was like, that's a good question. I just kind of like going. And what I realized, it's like, it just became part of me, just like
Yeah,
eating, meals a day, just like sleeping at nighttime. It was just something I had to do every single day. And I think that actually became part of my character, who I am as a person, of working out. So yes, I like that I look great. I like that my kids look up to me and they see it as a healthy lifestyle. But I would say, to be honest, it's just become part of who I am. I feel terrible if I don't work out.
yeah,
I look my way I look. I don't like the way I feel. And for all those reasons, it's just become part of my day, just like eating or sleeping, and I just don't miss it.
yeah,
But I mean, there's plenty of days you wake up and you don't want to work out, and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter. I'm like jumping in my car in shorts, I'm freezing. Like you don't want to do it, but it's just
yeah,
become part of who you are, like going to work or any other things that we do.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I don't lack motivation. I do like it. I do like
yeah.
the way you feel.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. The one thing that I always say is when people talk about like you lack that motivation. A good friend of mine, Kyle Newell, he's a big fitness personality coach, et cetera. He does a lot of my programming for me. His secret is do what you said you would do. And the day before, I say, okay, I'm going to get up at 4:15. I'm going to cold plunge, and I'm going to do my pole workout or whatever I'm going to do at that, when 4:15 hits and you're like, ugh, I don't really, when my daughter was up in the middle of the night having a nightmare or something, and you got 5 hours of sleep, you got to do what you said you would do. And that's how I motivate myself to do it, for sure. For sure.
But it is one of the most important things I find with employees or anybody I work with is people are good to their word. So if you
Yeah.
say you're going to do something, you're only as good as your bond and the word that you have. And if you don't live up to it, I can't trust anything you say. So for people I work with, if they tell me they're going to do something, they don't do it. Well, you better damn well tell me that you're not going to do it. Like, hey, remember when I told you I was going to do that? Well, I'm not going to do it because this and this. And if I
For
don't
sure.
get that email, I'm never going to believe another thing you say forever. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. So, I mean, outside of, the fitness and everything like that, is there anything else that you attribute your personal and, professional success to?
It is when I think about like all the things that have gone well in my life, whether it's business or working out or anything. It's always having an open mind. A lot of times, I was saying before, I don't know where things are going to go, but I know if I work really hard, if I talk to people, if I keep an open mind, if I listen to people who are smarter than me, it typically goes in the right direction. And not being afraid to ask for help. I've been very fortunate with mentors throughout my life, whether it's strength coaches or fitness coaches or whomever, football coaches, of reaching out to people. And I always tell people this, like there's someone out there we're in New Jersey, there's hundreds of people within 10 miles that are millionaires or billionaires. And that you just call them and say, like, hey, I want to do what you did. Can we have coffee? Like almost every single time they'll say yes. No one ever asked me that question. I'd love to tell you. And a story I tell about my startup is the $800,000 that we raised. The way we raised that was way after college. I worked in a small contract research lab for this guy, and he wound up selling the company for $60 million. And in between, I was doing my PhD, and I was working like part time. And one day he comes in and fires me at work. He's like, "We only want full time people, so like we don't have a job for you anymore." And I was like a little crushed, but wound up working out. And several years later, when I was running Visit Call, I reached back out to him. I was like, "Hey, Brian, you remember when you fired me? Well, like I'm doing the same thing you're doing. I need some help. I'd love to chat with you." So I met with him on the side of the Garden State Parkway one night. I tell him all about what we're doing. I tell him how we're trying to build this contract research organization. I tell him how we need $800,000. And we chopped for like 3 hours. And the next morning he calls me up. He's like, "All right, I'll cut you a check for $800,000. Like I'll help you out, be your mentor." And he jumped on board, helped us with our company. I called him like hours a week, asking him questions. He wrote the check and we were successful because of that. So I've always been very open to like asking for help from people who are way smarter than me, recognizing like I'm smart, but other people are smarter. So why not learn? So that's been, really key and just being open minded to that throughout the whole process.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I mean, now, you've had so many great mentors. Now, are you mentoring a lot of people, outside of, NJII? Are you mentoring, other, entrepreneurs that are in the life science space?
There's a couple I talk to, but I'll tell you, I make this offer every time I ever give a presentation is like, hey, reach out to me. I'd love to help you out. I'd love to give feedback. Very few people ever take you up on that. And I've talked to plenty of other people about this. Very few people reach out and say, like, hey, can we talk? Hey, can we do this? People don't like the mentoring. They want the quick solution. They want like a check. They don't want to just sit down and learn over long periods of time from someone smarter than themselves. And I hear that all the time, which is why I say do it, because there's some guy or girl out there who has the experience and they would love for you to reach out to them, but very few people ever take them up on that.
Yeah, no, that's crazy.
Both.
Well, I mean, you guys heard it here first then, Michael's, happy to be a helpful resource to you.
No, I say it all the time though. I'm always shocked that people don't take me up on it, but I think
That's
it's very
crazy.
common.
That's crazy. I mean, I can only agree. I mean, like my thing is like I've always hired a coach if I want to shorten the path of learning. And I've always had great mentors, whether I had to pay for them or I had, someone else. I fortunately have a lot of people that are, I'm 43. I have a lot of people that are like 10 years my senior, and I call them my older brothers, and they're just all my mentors. So before I ever make any big moves, I always, take them out to lunch, et cetera and everything.
I view
So
it as, like the ghost of Christmas yet to come. So you talk to those guys or girls 10 years older than you, and they've already made the mistakes that you don't want to make. And you talk to them and you're like, wow, that's something that I didn't know about. Now I know.
absolutely. Absolutely. So before we wrap up, I mean, do you have any advice for any aspiring, innovators that are out there that you could give?
Yes, the advice I give all the time to folks who are trying to go down that entrepreneurial road is when you think about like what cards you have, you're competing against the big guys. So if you're in pharma, you're competing against Merck. If you're in consumer products, you're competing against Procter and Gamble. And the only advantage you have is your ability to work more hours and the ability to be more efficient than those other companies. So if you're able to work 2 or 3 times as many hours as a standard employee, or 2 or 3 times more efficient, you're going to get 8 times, 10 times more work than those people. And that's like your only advantage as a founder, as an innovator. And I tell people when they're embarking on this journey, they need to be aware of that, because what that means is 5+ years of 100-hour work weeks. And
Yeah.
before you sign up for this, you have to ask yourself, like, can I do that? Do I want to do that? Am I willing to do that? Because that's what success requires. It's not like success might require that. Like it does require that for any person you've talked to who's gone through this experience and been successful. So like that's the first thing. Do you want to do that? Is the thing you're working on cool enough to you? Are you passionate about it enough? Do you think it deserves to be in the world enough that you're willing to do that? So that's first and foremost. And then with that, finding the person who already done the exact same thing that you've done. And I find that especially in the entrepreneurship space, those people, you don't have to pay them. Like if somebody reaches out to me and says like, hey, I want to work 5 years the next, my life, spending 100 hours a week doing this thing. You've done it. I want to learn from you. Well, hell yeah, I'm going to help them, because like I
Yeah.
want to see them succeed. They're committing. And you find that there's very few people willing to do that. Yet those are the people who change the world. So I want to help them. I want to make the world a better place and enable those folks. So those are like the two most critical things. What you're working on doesn't so much matter as long as you're willing to do that and also keep an open mind. A lot of founders, the reason they don't reach out to me for feedback is they think they know everything. They think they have all the answers. They think they're super smart. They think they're
Yeah.
the best, and they don't ask for help. So you have to be willing to accept that from other people. So if you're willing to do those things and put the effort in, you're going to be successful a lot of times. Not every time, but you will be successful a lot of time. So that's the feedback I always give to folks embarking on that journey.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I got one final question for you here. So, in your personal and professional life, was there one thing that happened that seemed small at the time that literally had the biggest impact on your life?
Oh, that's a really good question. Probably the biggest thing is meeting my wife. So I met my wife the first week of college, my freshman year. We've been together ever since. That's back in 2011. And no, that's wrong, 2007. So a long, long time. It was 20 years ago. And the reason that was so profound is I met her so early on in my life that I created the foundation for everything else. It was much easier to start a company because she was there. We were able to split rent. I mean, just practically speaking from finances, she supported every single crazy idea I ever had, never asked questions. Not, I told her, I'm quitting my 6-figure job at Johnson & Johnson and like getting paid zero to start a startup. She didn't say, why? I'm talking about money. She supported me throughout that whole process. She still bussed me that I was on her health insurance during that period of time, but that was critical to my success. I don't think I could have been as successful with all the other things if it wasn't for her there cheering me on, supporting me, financially, emotionally, and being a sounding board. Running a startup is hard; like it sucks. And she was always there throughout that process. That was definitely the most impactful thing that ever happened to me. And I was lucky to meet her when I was 18 years old. Super early, didn't have to waste a decade plus dating and doing all that. I joked that my last date was during the Bush administration, so it's been a while. Yeah.
No, that's great, man. I love that. I love that. So, where can people find you best? I mean, obviously, Michael's a great follow on LinkedIn. He's always putting out great content. We're always cheering each other on there, which I greatly appreciate. Where can people find you, Michael?
Yeah, so best place is njii.com is the NJII website. As far as my book, it'll be available on 1%dad.com and then also anywhere books are sold, but mostly Amazon there. So yeah, if you want to get in touch, definitely shoot me an email. All my contact information is up there, and I look forward to hearing from anybody who's interested in excelling in all the dimensions of being a father or innovation where it fits with NJI.
This is awesome. All right, Michael, thank you so much for joining me on the show today, and we will look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.